like to words. Is that better for the mic there?
Yeah. Because it was like down.
Hey!
I should have seen it coming. I only blame myself.
All right. Let's not bring unsponsored items into the table. So I want to drink it right here.
There's not even a name on there, is there?
No, it's not. There's not. No. If I put it like this.
Perfect.
All right. So the subject of today's episode is anxiety.
Ooh.
It's a good one.
That is a good one.
Yeah, we love anxiety.
We love it. It's so fun.
Do you enjoy anxiety?
It's my best friend.
Apparently. All right. So, Amelia, let's start with a classic question. What do you think anxiety is?
Ooh. I think anxiety is when your brain goes on autopilot. And like, okay, hang with me. You are no longer in control. You're no longer driving the vehicle. Your brain is like, I'm the captain now, and I'm gonna F some stuff up. And your brain's like, let's think of all the possibilities in the world. And if something stands out to us as like alarming, we got to bring it to attention of the captain, the like real captain. And this metaphor is like getting really confusing in my head. But
it's very confusing.
but essentially, like, anxiety comes about when you're almost like not in control of your brain. And I know that's kind of a controversial thing to say, but from my time with meditation, I've really found that the times when I'm able to control my anxiety or like able to deal with it are the times when I'm the one in control of my brain and my brain's not just doing its own thing on autopilot.
There's a very interesting concept there. I'm not going to go into it. It's about, so who are you if you're not your brain? But that's not today's subject.
That's the topic for another podcast.
Yeah, exactly. So that's an interesting perspective.
What do you think
or personal
anxiety
perspective to see anxiety? It's very interesting. Anxiety is basically when you go on an override and your brain is just firing signals left and right about possibilities of what could go wrong, like day-to-day things that shouldn't be a stress, should be just dealt with. And now that brings me to remembering the podcast that we talked about being resourceful. Basically, anxiety is when your brain is just in constant fear, stress. It has this sensation of something bad is going to happen, and then if this happens, and it goes in an infinite loop of bad consequences for something that is very simple to tackle. And it's interesting because if you think about before, when we didn't have so much technology and people were just basically surviving in the wild, there was no time for what happens if this happened. It's just everything is happening. You just have to deal with it right then and there. For example, let's say we are surviving in the jungle. Like, we have so many things that we have to do, like finding wood for the fire, or hunting, and then gathering, then making sure the shelter doesn't fall apart, and then we need to go. I'm thirsty. Let's go drink water, and now you got hurt, and it's like a constant living in the moment. I feel like anxiety has come to be more something more common now because of the fact that we have this concept of tomorrow I have to do this, and tomorrow I have this and that. So usually anxiety comes from a future time state of mind. When you're thinking about what's upcoming, what's going to happen, is when you start to get anxiety. And it's part of modern society. You will never take that away, because planning is crucial in order to survive in this society. But it also can get out of control if you don't know when to stop thinking about the future. Um, and we can go into very deep Eastern, Eastern philosophy of being in the moment, and I don't feel like that's the podcast for it, but it's part of it. If you focus on the things that you can do now to fix the future, is way easier, and you get less anxiety. And at the end, my at the end of the anxiety cycle of consequence through consequence through consequence, if you face the fact, okay, let's see what's the worst scenario. Let's say you are still in an anxious state of mind. You're very anxious, and you say, okay, what's the worst that can happen if this happens? Okay, the worst thing that can happen is that my boss is gonna, or my dad, or my parents are gonna get mad at me. So what happens if that happens? Well, I'm gonna feel bad. And what happens if you feel bad? Like, if you go to the worst case scenario is not even that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that you're not able to confront those situations because again, you're not resourceful enough to find a way to deal with them.
It all comes back to resourcefulness.
To a point, yeah. And I feel like part of being able to control anxiety and being able, because it's easy for me to say yes, anxiety can be controlled, but there are certain conditions that certain brains, certain human beings that don't have certain neurotransmitters in abundance, like GABA, that is the number one regulator of anxiety because it's the chief of inactivity in the brain. So some people, with exceptions, they cannot control anxiety and they need to be medicated. I'm not saying that those people can just simply fix it. And if you feel like your anxiety is not normal, go to the doctor. I'm just here for the people that have a more of a normal condition. I feel like dealing with it, being able to focus your brain into the present, into what you actually want, you have to focus about, is a practice. Just like being able to jump higher or just like being able to run faster. Like, in order for you to swim, you need to learn how to swim. In order for you to dance, you need to learn how to dance, and rhythm and new moves will come with it. But first, you need to learn how to control your brain, or you need to have the tools for it.
So how do people do that?
Well, there's again the you have talked about this, and I remember you saying it. This age is the age of information. It's so simple. Everyone has a smartphone, or most of the world has a smartphone. And if you live in a very um, non-advanced third world, like I used to, you can go to a place where you pay, or you ask someone, or you search in a public library, search, like, be resourceful and
Yeah.
find ways to learn how to deal with it. Like, ask questions too. You can ask people and see. Information is everywhere if you want to. But obviously, again, we go back to, I'm anxious. I want a quick and fast solution. I do not want to progress slowly. I just want to be done with it, and I just want to feel normal. And there are solutions where you can just go to a psychiatric and do this and that. Some people that go to the resource of alcohol, and it's interesting that alcohol is the one that most people go to, and it's very and it makes sense once you understand that alcohol excites the GABA neurotransmitter in your brain. So it makes your brain produce more GABA. So that's why you feel less anxious, because GABA is the regulator of anxiety. So is the most common drug used for it. Now, why do you think that people don't think why people think that they are not able to deal with their anxiety? Why they feel like they are not powerful enough, or they don't have the strength enough to deal themselves with anxiety? What is the mind block? You feel like, let's say I'm anxious, and in my mind I feel like there's nothing I can do. Like, I'm just gonna be anxious all the time. I need to go to a doctor. I can't deal with this. I need someone to help. Like, why do you feel like people feel this way, instead of saying, okay, I have anxiety, I don't like this, there must be a solution that I can find, or there's some practice that I can start doing that might help me with this? Why do you think is that?
So basically, why do people not become resourceful if they are experiencing anxiety? That's what you're asking?
Specifically for anxiety, yeah. For
Yeah.
example, like, you know that if you want to have a six pack, you know that obviously you
gotta
need to
put in the
work.
work.
Yeah, you need to work out, you need to eat. But people know that, but they do not suffer from having it and not having a six pack. At least into certain levels, you know. It's not the same type of suffering as you will have as being anxious constantly. So why do I know the resource, like the path for me to have a six pack, but I don't know. It's not normally known the path to deal with anxiety. Why do you think that is? And what is the state of mind that you're on when you're anxious constantly and you're not able to deal with it?
I think it goes into the very nature of anxiety itself and the state that you are in. Because the way that anxiety works, at least in my experience, is it tells you we need to freak out about this. We need to worry about something because something is very bad or could potentially be very bad, and we need to stress about this. So you're automatically put into this state of like, oh no, like I should be worrying. Like now I am worrying about this, and it doesn't give you space to take a step back and look at it on its own. That's where you have to put in the work and do it on your own in order to build up that practice of seeing things objectively, seeing your anxiety not as not like getting caught up in the anxiety and letting it control you, but being able to see and notice that you are experiencing anxiety and kind of step outside of that in order to make the decisions you need to make. And it's really not easy. Like that's why it's a practice in learning how to deal with it and learning how to take a step back, because the way that anxiety works is such that it does, like, it almost pulls you down under the water, and like it's almost, I don't want to say it's like attractive in that way, but because it's telling you to worry, then you get even more worried that there is something to worry about, and then you're worried about worrying, and it just spirals. So it's so easy to get caught up in it, and that's why I think it's not easy to take the steps you need to take in order to free yourself from it. I think it is, the very nature of it is to pull you in and is to keep you captive of that worry. What are your thoughts on that?
I want to hear your personal experience with it.
Okay.
When do you feel like it started for you? If you ever have had anxiety detectable that you can say, okay, I'm being very anxious. Has it been one particular situation in your life? Have you had it like most of your life? Did it start at some point, or has it been only one episode of it? For you, what has how anxiety has looked in your life throughout the years? Or
I think I noticed it and like was able to name that it was anxiety for the first time in college.
How old were you?
I was probably like 19. It really, like, I was able to recognize it as anxiety, as like a social anxiety, because I have family members that have experienced anxiety in different ways, and I had not experienced it in those ways. So what I was experiencing, I didn't think it was anxiety because it didn't look like that of my family members.
What were you experiencing?
So I was experiencing feeling very uncomfortable in social situations, feeling like I couldn't like be myself. I couldn't relate to people. I felt like I just felt like I had no idea what I was doing in that situation, and like I couldn't be a real human being unless I had something like alcohol to lower the inhibitions, I guess raise GABA. Is that how that works? And kind of lighten the load on me a little bit. And not to say that I took it to the point of an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, at least to my understanding of how I dealt with it. But but I had like a base level anxiety anytime I would go into social situations with like people I didn't know, or even sometimes with close friends. I would, like, even if I were with a close friend one on one, if we had too much silence, I was like, this is not how life is supposed to work. Like, I need to do XYZ in order to fill the silence. That's one example, but um, later on, like years after that, I experienced it more um, as just basic worry. And being able to put the label on it as this is worry helped me be able to like have a perspective on it and know that like yes it was anxiety, but it's something that I could control. um so an example of that is like I used to have really bad exercise anxiety. Actually, when I was in college, I went through a phase where every time I exercised, like my stomach would hurt. I would feel sick. It didn't matter what I had eaten during the day, when I had eaten. I always felt sick, and I realized that it was anxiety. That my body felt like it was having a panic attack when it was exercising. And on top of that, I was putting this pressure on myself to, do X number of crunches or whatever, or look a certain way. And when I felt like that wasn't achievable, that's when the anxiety would sink in. And then when I started like actually like doing strength training this past year, I really experienced the anxiety on like a very conscious level, because it wasn't just in the back of my head like I'm feeling sick, maybe I didn't eat well, or maybe this is anxiety. This time I knew it was anxiety, because I would feel going to the gym every time this intense dread of I can't do this. This is too hard for me and I'm going to fail. And that that narrative that I was telling myself was just dragging me down. And it was this worry that I wasn't going to be good enough, or I wasn't going to do enough. And when I was even in the midst of that exercise, if something was really hard for me, the anxiety was like, we can't do this. We're not going to push through because it's not worth it. So those are just like a couple of examples of where I have felt anxiety. But also just like like before going back to work the other day after a long break, just feeling the anticipation of going back, getting started into this routine again, especially with the uncertainty of each day as a teacher. I felt this weight of worry over me. And it can be really hard to shake. But I think one of the most important things that I've done for myself is meditating in order to give myself like resources if I'm starting to feel anxious.
That's what I was going to ask. So you do seem like you do have certain level of anxiety.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm just judging by the things you were saying. I don't know, but that's what I want to understand. Like how, so you were able to recognize I do have certain level of like low resistance to anxiety or anxious moments and stuff like that. I do have this, um, and how, like, okay, so you recognize it first because there's no way of changing something if you don't recognize you have it.
Mm-hmm.
So on what point you said I have to find a solution, and what was your first solution to it? Like from the first solution you thought it was the best one for anxiety to the ones you're using now, what were they, and what are the ones that you like the most, or were proved to be the best path for you?
That's a good question. I think at the beginning, a lot of what I did was honestly like deal with it or learn how to fit in, even if it means not being yourself. Those were kind of survival tactics that I think were super unhealthy for me because it required me to compromise part of who I am. And another part of that is like with alcohol, feeling like I had to have at least a drink or two drinks in order to feel comfortable around people that I considered my friends. That should not be how things are. And I think it was just, being in college and feeling like this is such a wonderful opportunity for me to make friends. Like, I have to take advantage of it. I have to, you know, push my introverted self to be a little more extroverted, which can be good. That challenge is very good, I think, for introverts. But at the same time, I think I went about it through means that were not healthy for me, and didn't help me grow as a human. It more just helped me cope with it. Um, and it ultimately ended up blowing up in my face a couple of times where I would have like huge explosion cry sessions and not really understanding what was going on. But then over time, I was able to use exercise as a way to just reduce stress and lower the chances of
But
getting.
before it, exercise was
It
a
was.
source of
It
stress for
was. I really started to use running, honestly, as like a stress reliever, and that wasn't a way to. It was not a way to cope with anxiety in the moment. It was more to prevent it. But really in the last year, I had never done this before, but in the last year I turned to meditation thanks to your suggestion. And it honestly, like, it's been really freaking hard. I will have to say that, especially given that it requires you to kind of get out of your mind. And that's something that I don't do very easily because I'm constantly, calculating, constantly judging, constantly trying to come up with solutions in my head. I think part of that comes from being a teacher. Part of that might be a female thing. Part of it is just who I am. But it forces you to get more in your body, out of your mind, and to feel more like to let the core of who you are be the one at the wheel instead of your brain. Because for somebody with anxiety, it can be really dangerous to let your brain always be the one calling the shots, to let your thoughts dictate everything you do. It can be really dangerous. So I've found through meditation that if I'm able to, let's just put it this way, the latest guided meditation that I've been doing is specifically on handling anxiety. And what they teach you to do is they say, follow your breath. And as you're following your breath, as different thoughts arise, as different emotions arise, the moment you realize that you have lost focus on your breath, think to yourself, okay, was that a thought or was that an emotion that I was experiencing? Okay, that was an emotion. Was it pleasant? Was it unpleasant? Or was it neutral? It was unpleasant. Okay, now that I know that I've had an unpleasant emotion, what can I call that emotion? What name can I put with it? And if it's, say that it's sadness, then you're going to say, okay, I'm experiencing sadness. And then you're going to move on and go back to your breath. And what they tell you to do is to apply that to every part of your life. if you're doing some project for work and you're really focused and then you start feeling really stressed, it doesn't help you in your work to be super stressed. I mean, to some extent, stress can be helpful, but if it's like really making you worry, if it's making you anxious, then you stop and you're like, okay, what's going on? What am I feeling? Is it positive, negative? Is it like what emotion is it? Or what thought is arising in my mind? And then you're like, okay, got it. So I was feeling stressed. It was a negative emotion. All right, let's move on. Let's keep going. And it really helps you to not brush off your anxiety, because I found that trying to swallow tears is just going to make it build up and up and up until it explodes. But instead, you're able to make peace with it, and you're recognizing that it's there, but you're not letting it overtake you. You're recognizing that it has come up. You might start to think about, oh, where did it come from? And that's where you start to kind of get into solutions. But before you even do that, you're like, all right, I'm experiencing anxiety. Bye, anxiety. Keep floating. I like to think of it like I'm in an ocean, although I get stressed in the ocean. So instead of the ocean, I think of like a lap pool, or not a lap pool, a wave pool. So I'm in a wave pool and I'm lying on my back, and the waves are coming and flowing over me. And in one wave, anxiety comes, and I'm like, oh, hello, anxiety. Goodbye, anxiety. And I just watch it go by. And that helps me realize that I am not my anxiety. My anxiety is something that I experience, but it's not who I am. And so once you're able to do that, you're able to think, okay, maybe there's something I can do in order to help myself relax, or maybe I don't need to do anything. Maybe I just need to let it wash over me and I'm good. It depends on the situation, of course, but having that awareness of what's going on is really so pertinent to being able to let it go.
It's a very interesting perspective, and to see how, and thank you for that. Thank you for letting us see how you see it. It's interesting because it's important. I want to make this point clear. Although there is a neurotransmitter that is in charge of regulating anxiety to a certain extent, that is GABA. It's a very important, I'll say it's one of the most important neurotransmitters in our brain, um, that it regulates GABA. And I want to make another comparison to, let's compare the brain to muscles or the body. If you have a certain condition, let's say that you have very thin bones, and they're not as strong, obviously, you cannot just go and start lifting 400 pounds because something's going to happen to your bones. But maybe you still want to get in shape, but you still have this condition that is not going to allow you to do high impact sports. But then if you keep on searching, then you realize that swimming has no impact in your structure, in your joints. So swimming is the thing for you. Although I have this condition, I'm able to go and make myself stronger or more resistant, or being able to have a better capacity, or um, work out my muscles by swimming, because I cannot do CrossFit or boxing because I'm going to break my bones because I do have a condition. And I feel like it's the same with our brain. We might have certain preconditions that we are born with, but I feel like that shouldn't be an excuse for us not to work into being able to control. A beautiful tool that we're born with, that is our brain, is a perfect solution for society. It helps you solve problems, but your brain was not created for you to be happy. Your brain is not created for happiness. And this is a well-known um, saying, that your brain is not created for happiness. We already know our brain was created for us to survive. It's a tool for our survival. And our tool, obviously, as a good tool and a servant that the brain is for us, is always going to make us see the things that might jeopardize our life. So it might see things as life-threatening things, but they're not life-threatening because your brain will recognize any minimum danger of things that will not even hurt you physically as something huge, because that's what that tool is for. But again, is a tool, and the one that can use that tool is you. So yes, I do understand when people tell me, but Manuel, you don't know when people have certain conditions or doesn't have enough GABA or has a lack of serotonin and all of that. And I say, yeah, I do understand that. But even so, that person that has those conditions can optimize their brain to the point where if they still need something, then they could take it. And maybe whatever they're taking might be less than what they were taking before, because now their brain is stronger. It's the same thing about a guy that suffered from lack of muscle, or a condition that I don't know the name for it. Um, but there's always a path that obviously is never going to be the easy one, the easy path. There's always a path for us to improve that what we lack of. For me, health wise, my liver is not my most effective organ in my body. And I have come to realize that throughout the years, and the things that I've been experiencing, I everything that I've been reading so far is linked to my liver, and my family has a history of liver not functioning well. So that could be something that I can get anxious about. Oh, my liver. Oh my God. So and this and that, and but after a while, you realize I was born with this. There's nothing else that I can do but to find a solution for it, or to see how can I optimize it to a point where I'm able to live a happier or a healthier life. Although I still supplement myself with liver supplements, but not anything that will be chemical produced. I supplement myself with things that are natural, things that are because I need it. My liver needs some help. Okay, and for some people that might be it. But now, what was the hard path that I chose to help my liver, to make my liver happier or more effective? I have chosen not to drink, and if I do drink, might be once in a month, and it will be, if I do drink, it will be half a beer, and I'm already gone by it, or maybe a glass of wine, and I don't need anymore. I do not enjoy drinking anymore, mainly because I do not want my liver to have to deal with an extra thing when I'm already trying to make it stronger. And those are the things, those are the choices that you can make. Obviously, it's very hard when you go to a social place and they're asking you, hey, um, you why don't you drink? And they're forcing you. So going back to the whole subject of anxiety, I feel like we all have the responsibility, and there is so much information out right now that might help you out with anxiety. And anxiety is something that we can train our brain to be more resistant towards, or to have less anxiety, or to learn how to deal with it. So I feel like it's our responsibility at the end to take action towards it, and become more resourceful when it happens.
And do you feel like that action becomes easier over time?
I feel like if you practice anything, anything in life will become easier. But again, the moment that you learn how to do a front flip, you're already starting your path to a double front flip. So it's just a path of enjoying the progress. Tony Robbins says, progress equals happiness. I feel like that's the key. You'll never reach a goal where you just, I achieved this. Even if you win the Olympics, next Olympics, you want to win the Olympics again, you know? Or even if you won an Oscar, you want to be the one that has the most. Or like if you get into that mentality, your life is going to be a constant anxiety. I feel like the mentality, um, the 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 way to think about it is every time you progress, that should bring you happiness. But it's not to stress. Oh, I didn't progress today. I am going to. That's part of it. Is a journey, and sometimes in a journey you have to stop and camp and eat, and maybe you want to stop to enjoy the sight that you're watching instead of keep going. And I feel like it is a balance, but we do have the responsibility to improve those things that we to improve our challenges. They're challenges for a reason, and I am a firm believer that nothing that we encounter that is presented to us as a obstacle or a challenge, we do have the tools to deal with it. The thing is that sometimes we just don't want to because it's easier not to and look the other way. And I feel like anxiety, stress, and all of that, it is something that is affecting a lot of people. And I'm not who to judge those people that have anxiety. And I'm not here to judge. I'm saying that you do have the tools to do it. We all do. Unless you have a very specific type of problem with your brain neurotransmitters that obviously you need some help, but still, we all can put it some effort to improve it to a certain extent. Anything else you want to add for before we finish this one?
I think I would just say, like, additionally, resources can look like a lot of different things, and um, your tools that you use in order to improve your situation can look different and does look different for everyone. Some people do require outside help if they have an imbalance in their brain. Like, that is still seeking their resources if it comes from someone else. But I also see what you're saying about, like, unless you are at that point, you know, go for the resources that just rely on you first.
And I agree 100%. If your immediate resource is to seek out help, that's totally fine too. Like, that's you're trying to find a solution. Once you seek out help and you see that you also can add your own exercises to it, then use them too. There's always a path to something. And I want to add the ways that I deal with anxiety myself. I feel like at this point I'm just numb to anxiety. Um, is Anxiety is always going to be there, no matter how perfect your life is. There's always going to be something to be anxious about, no matter what type of life you're going through. And I feel like at the end, is a common enemy that we choose to deal with it in different ways, and it depends on us. For me, the way that I deal with it is I build the confidence that I have in me. I am very, very confident in myself, and that has come because I have put in the effort to deal with it. I've learned to meditate. I've learned to work out, to do things that I enjoy. I've learned how to have, as much as I can, a healthy life or a healthy nutrition with the nutrients that we need for our brain. I also supplement myself with magnesium. That is very important. It's hard to find in day-to-day food, and it's very important to our brain. And at the end, doing things that you love and seeing yourself progress in those things that you love and the ones that you don't love is part of dealing with anxiety. Because as soon as anxiety arises, and you already have a very big confidence that no matter what comes, you can deal with it, then anxiety has no place in your brain. Like, you might feel it for a little, but it's like whenever you get bit by a, never mind. Some people get hurt like getting bit by a mosquito, so I take that
Yeah,
away.
true.
All right. Anything else you want to add before we close this one? All right. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Prate Me Not, and we'll see you in the next one.